如果说美国有一位经济金融巨人的话，那么应该是保罗·沃尔克莫属。他确实呢有2.05米那么高。那么在金融危机之后呢，曾经红极一时的美联储主席格林斯潘受到了大家的责难，认为他放纵了这一次金融危机的产生。那么在这样的背景下呢，保罗·沃尔克获得了至高无上的地位，因为他在1980年代曾经成功的制服了美国的超级通货膨胀。那么之后呢，他也成为美国总统经济复苏顾问委员会主席。那么今天呢，在访问中国的间隙，我们采访了美国的这位经济金融巨人保罗·沃尔克。
保罗·沃尔克这位身高2.05米的85岁耄耋老人，曾为5位美国总统服务过，并在1979至1987年连任过2届美国联邦储备委员会主席，对货币政策的精通令人折服。有人曾这样评论：保罗·沃尔克生来就是当联储会主席的。如今，他是奥巴马总统经济复苏顾问委员会的主席。
What is your biggest headache today?
My biggest headache today? Well, I got lots of headaches, but look, the biggest problem we face in the United States is a very divided political system right now. We have very big challenges. Everybody recognizes the challenge. Everybody has a different solution to it. That's the big challenge. That's what gives me a headache.
That's the reason why the President Obama needs you.
欧洲央行与欧盟峰会推出诸多危机救助措施，但皆遭到德国等严守财政纪律国家的反对或阻挠。西班牙、意大利等国状况依然不佳，且希腊退出欧元区再次被提上议程，欧洲经济依然持续低迷。然而，在美国，联邦公开市场委员会宣布，将从2012年9月15日开始推出进一步量化宽松政策，即 QE3，每月采购400亿美元的抵押贷款支持证券。
But do you think QE3 is necessary?
I don't like that terminology anyway, but the Federal Reserve has to make up their judgment about what to do. They can't make interest rates significantly lower than where they are. You can't go below zero. You can put more money into the economy. That's their judgment. I'm not going to.
And back to the United States economy, do you see the recovery we have seen today is solid or still a green shoots? It will disappear sometime, maybe next year because of the fiscal cliff.
Well, green shoots imply a recovery and growth. And the green shoots began a couple of years ago. It shouldn't take 2 years for green shoots to develop. But look, we are caught in the United States and much of the world in so-called deleveraging. We borrowed too much internally and externally, and so did other countries. And we got involved in some speculative excesses, and so did some European countries. And I think the record, and there's been a lot of discussion of this with economic analysis, that you get in this kind of a crisis with a breakdown of the financial system and with much too much leverage, not just by banks, but in other areas of the economy, it takes much longer to recover and restore a vibrant economy than with an ordinary business cycle that goes up and down in a hurry.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, politics going on in the United States now, and people say, well, this is bad, it's the government's fault that it's a slow recovery. I think it's a slow recovery because of what happened before the crisis, not what happens now.
Yeah.
美国总统奥巴马在2010年1月公布了一项由保罗·沃尔克提出的新政，以禁止银行业自营交易为主，将自营交易与商业银行业务分离，也就是禁止银行利用参加联邦存款保险的存款进行自营交易、投资对冲基金或者私募基金。业界把这项政策称为沃尔克规则。随后，一些银行开始担心他们的对冲基金和私募股权业务将被强行剥离，而首当其冲的很可能是投行大佬摩根大通。
Shall we start the famous Walker's rule, because it has become even on the center of the policy debate after the J.P. Morgan just released that they have a $2 billion loss when they try to hedge the loan portfolio.
Right.
But the Jamie Dimon just insists that the trade could have been legal even the Walker's rule had been in place. Do you buy him?
Well, I don't know all the facts of that situation, so I'm not going to comment The Volcker rule, so-called, is not in effect now, of course, because the regulation has not yet been issued. But I think it depends upon the facts of the situation whether or not the Volcker rule would have applied or not. So I can't comment without knowing the facts.
But many more people are on your side, actually, and they think that the J.P. Morgan case just should hasten the process. Yeah, that's true. And also, still people have some doubt about that. Do you think the Volcker's rule is too much compromised to be effective?
No, well, I don't know the final regulation, but I do not believe so, no. I think everything that's happened will make it possible for the regulators to do a good job. And I think it is possible to have an effective regulation and to do what the rule is supposed to do, which is to prevent substantial proprietary trading, to prevent banks from owning and sponsoring hedge funds and equity funds.
Yeah.
That's an important part of it, which there doesn't seem to be so much conflict about. That's generally accepted. And I think the idea is generally accepted, but there's a lot of smoke about the ability to implement it. I think it is a natural reaction of the people that don't like it to say it doesn't work very well. I think they're wrong.
Okay, but at the same time, people are a little bit worried that it's very difficult to actually to draw the line between what is proprietary trading and what is not.
I'm a little bit tired of hearing about that. I think bankers know very well the difference between proprietary trading and customer trading. If they don't know the distinction between proprietary trading and customer trading, they should not be in charge of a bank.
But do you think it's a little bit arbitrary and subjective?
It's not arbitrary at all. It's not at all arbitrary.
4月19日，美国联邦储备委员会与美国其他4家金融监管机构发表联合声明称，银行业需在2014年7月21日之前完全符合沃尔克规则的要求，剥离自营业务。这就意味着银行业将有2年的适应期，在这2年内，他们仍可开展自营业务。
The United States government decided to postpone the time of the effection of the Volcker's rule. Do you think it's a bad thing or a good thing?
Yeah, that's news to me.
I have heard that you even said that the only needed innovation for the banking sector is ATM. So what is your...
That was a bit of an illustration. That
right.
was not to be taken absolutely literally, but the fact is that a lot of the so-called financial innovation I don't think has been particularly helpful, and some of it has ended up in weakening the system. You know, a lot of this innovation was sold on the basis that through this clever application of mathematical and statistical techniques, that the risk would be reduced for the banking system and for the economy. That risk, almost claimed the risk would disappear. Well, the risk would never disappear, but it would be so diffused that it would not present a problem in the face of a crisis. Well, we learned the opposite. Instead, the risks got diffused in a way that were very complicated to trace the results, and some of the risks got concentrated rather than reverse. Yeah. So I think the case for reform is very strong. I was just happened to spend a day in Brussels at the invitation of the European Parliament, where this issue was precisely under discussion with me and with Mr. Vickers, Sir John Vickers, who had developed a somewhat similar. We both see the same problem. We have different ways of approaching it. But my sense was that the European Parliament is very interested in these approaches, and the point we were both making is that we do need some what we call structural reform in banking, some activities that are permitted or not permitted by law, rather than just by judgment or supervisory review.
Yeah.
And we both agree that some of these areas of proprietary trading should be removed from ordinary commercial banking.
You just mentioned that it is very important to prevent the regulation arbitrage.
Right,
So
exactly.
you have to have the Volcker's rule, European version of that and UK version of that. Do you think we should have a Chinese version?
Well, it's very important to get some degree of common approach between the UK and the United States, because the big financial markets are the UK and the United States. For China, yes, I would like to see them adopt the same approach, but it's not, in a sense, so critical in China because the banks don't do that now.
But they are trying to do that.
Well, all right. Well, so let's take care of it before they do it.
Okay.
So I think it is important for China to adopt a similar approach, and the continent of Europe to have a similar approach. But in China's case, it's more prophylactic. It's preventative rather than changing what's underway now.
So you're going to warn China's government to be very careful about
absolutely.
that. But are you a little bit concerned about the cost? When we all have a Volcker's rule in this world, are we going to have a higher cost for lending, higher cost for credit?
To the contrary. I think the banks
should
be in the lending business. They concentrate on the lending business, and their talent is in that direction. It will provide more effective facilities, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises. The really big companies can operate in the market away from banks for borrowing. The small companies can't do that, so a strong banking system is very important. A lot of the growth and vitality of the economy comes from small and medium-sized enterprises. And I've heard that in the last couple of days here in Shanghai as strongly as I hear it in the United States.
And then let's talk a little bit about the Eurozone crisis. We're talking about the Brexit today. Do you think it's possible?
Well, the Eurozone crisis is obviously a very difficult matter.
Yeah.
I, myself personally, have been a believer in the euro, although it obviously was an incomplete. They did the exchange rate, they didn't do the other part, which is maintaining some discipline among the member states, so they don't have the discrepancies that develop. It's interesting that the tensions in the euro, where you had strong surplus country
and deficit
countries, reminds me a little bit of China and the United States.
Right, exactly.
Which was an unsustainable situation too, but we don't have a common currency, so it's a little different.
But if Brexit becomes true, do you think what Mr. Draghi should do? Shall we have the third round of LTRO, or the ECB should become the lender of last resort for every country in the Eurozone crisis, in the Eurozone?
Well, look, the central bank there has already done extraordinary things in terms of the treaty.
Enough?
Because of the desire to maintain, I think it's rather strong in Europe, to maintain the stability of the euro, and they may be asked to do still more, because there's no other instrument in place. You've got to get those, whatever it is, number of countries to agree to action that affects their fiscal results, that affects the obligation of the country. And it's obviously proved difficult to get a degree of consensus among those countries to provide the support that's necessary. It's kind of a dilemma in Europe, a dilemma elsewhere. The lending countries, mainly Germany, don't want to make too big a commitment for fear that the borrowing countries won't carry out their commitment. And the borrowing countries say, we can't stand all this austerity unless we know that financing will be available. So it's a difficult situation. What you see is a lack of a European government. It's got a European central bank, but it hasn't got a European government. And that's going to have to be changed to some degree. And that's the fundamental solution, I think, to the euro in the long run. You have to have a central authority that one way or another can prevent these big imbalances from arising.
So you mean you are pro-euro bond at a final stage?
Well,
or
I'm not necessarily pro-euro bond right now, because that's a situation where the same lack of trust, if that's the right word is, develops. They don't want a euro bond before they're sure there is control over the policies of the countries that will be borrowing. So it's it's part of the same dilemma. The euro bond might follow a more integrated government, But the integrated government can't follow the Eurobond, the politics as well as the economics of a unified Europe.
And also, there's a suggestion in the Eurozone saying that to inflate away the debt may be one part of the solution. Paul Krugman just suggested that the Fed should tolerate 3 to 4%. Yeah.
Paul Krugman is wrong.
I think so too. I think so too. Thank you to be so frank.
Well, you know, it's a long struggle in Europe, and there's no question that the competitive relationships within Europe got distorted, with Germany having been very disciplined and some of the other countries less disciplined, and there's quite a wide discrepancy in their labor productivity, which is going to take a long time to completely change. But that doesn't mean the balance of payments has to reflect all that. Lots of countries have differences in labor productivity, but don't have big differences in the balance of payments. There's no easy way out of this European thing. It's not going to be quick.
Yeah.
But obviously, equally obviously, if these countries, particularly the deficit countries, Spain, Italy, the big ones, Portugal and Ireland, Iceland could begin showing some growth, that would be very important psychologically and give the time to make the fundamental adjustments.
But the very important question you didn't answer is that if you were Mr. Draghi, will you put the ECB to become the final resort, final lender resort?
If I were Mr. Draghi, which I'm not, and I don't aspire to, I would wish that the governments got together and decided what they wanted to do decisively in moving toward a more integrated economic management within Europe. Not just the budget's part of it, it's a big part of it, but it's not the whole thing. So I would say, look, I'm at your service, you're the governments, you get together and then I'll decide what we can do.
在处理美国金融经济问题上信心满满、得心应手的保罗·沃尔克，对于处在高速发展的中国经济又有着怎样的经验和建议？
China's PBOC's the balance sheet as a share of GDP is about 60%, and also the ECB is 30%. For the United States, it's about 20%. But do you think this kind of a calculation is relevant for the
no, what's
liquidity?
relevant is all these central bank balance sheets have blown up because in the midst of the crisis they acted not as entirely as a central bank. They became a financial intermediary because the other intermediaries broke down.
Yeah, that's true.
So they replaced, to some extent, the private market. So the question gets raised, can you reverse that? It's necessary to reverse it. And yes, I think you can.
You think that Bernanke can do that?
Well, you say Bernanke. Bernanke's a man. The Federal Reserve can do it over time, yes.
Yeah, but what do you think the PBOC, do they have the strength to do that in the future?
Look, what it comes down to, it's an interesting, you say the strength. It's not a question, it's not a technical question, it's a question of whether there's a sense of discipline and a willingness to do it, because when you move not from the easing side but to the tightening side of credit, it's not always so popular. So it is a question whether these people have the strength.
When we look at China, we are looking at RMB, and now RMB is on the way to make it more internationalized. And also some people are worried that RMB is kind of on a risky adventure without precondition, including the interest rate liberalization and floating exchange rate, and also the capital account convertibility. So some scholars in China are very skeptical about what PBOC is doing now. But will you help the PBOC do that?
This raises a lot of detailed questions, which I don't really want to get into.
I'm sorry for that.
You know, there is a relationship between liberalization of the markets and liberalization of the RMB. There's no question about that.
But do you think the RMB will become a very strong currency if China can continue to reform?
It's all up to China. China's doing pretty well, so I trust China.
And will you comment a little bit on China's effort to fight with the global imbalances? You mentioned about the global imbalances of the.
Well, we've seen. I think a lot more needs to be done. A lot more needs to be done by the United States. But fortunately, the Chinese current account, anyway, has gotten smaller. The surplus has gotten smaller. I don't know whether that's temporary or not. That's the question. But
do you think it's temporary?
Well, I don't know. I don't know enough about the Chinese economy, but a lot of questions about the speed of growth and competitiveness, and I read that young women in China are no longer so eager to go work in assembly line for low wages, so maybe there's an adjustment process going on there just as it needs to be in Europe.
What kind of the message do you want to send to the China's next leadership?
Well, the message I want to send is that China has reached a point, as I spoke this morning, that it is a major world economy. There's no question about that. And that carries certain responsibilities in its own interest as well as in the world's interest, because China cannot prosper, in my view, in isolation. And it gave up that idea some years ago, and it's blossomed, it's grown tremendously, because it now is part of the world economy. But being part of the world economy carries responsibilities too, of not running excessive surpluses, for instance, in the balance of payments, and making possible international investment, and creating conditions in which the rest of the world can also prosper. Take the issue of intellectual property rights. That is part of an international understanding, basically. Right. And the world is based upon a number of important international understandings. Some not very visible, others visible. International accounting standards is another area where we have to get together. So there are a lot of areas where, if you want to participate in the world economy, benefit from the world economy, you have to accept some international norms which you can contribute to making. I mean, they're not just imposed upon you, they're part of a negotiation.
本节目由中国工商银行上海分行特约播出。工商银行小企业金融服务，助力千行百业，共创无限未来。中国工商银行。
今日的王者，挑战，铸造他们的皇冠。远见，奠定他们的版图。今日的王者不止领域世界，他们超越这个世界。皇家礼炮让不凡成为非凡。
谁能定制我的财富未来？当然是我自己。但重要的是找一个专业客观的财富管理伙伴，帮我全盘规划，让我尽享财富人生。君子爱财，理之有道，广发财富管理。
倾注160年的执着和热爱，用真情成就每一杯杰卡斯。真情有我，杰卡斯。
灵感在于创造，更在于传承。灵感塑造世界，马爹利 XO。
假如它们可以相连。OSIM 天网椅 App 以专属 App 将天网椅与 iPhone 轻松相连。让按摩更享受，更有乐趣。分享 OSIM 天网椅 App， 轻松分期零利率。
OSIM。
人生不是过得怎样，而是懂得怎样去过。 得创造非凡，欣赏各中精彩。轩尼诗原创 XO， 愈欣赏愈懂欣赏。
行动，一切皆有可能。全新一代终极作家迪兰特朗诵，震撼上市，朗于心，动于行。Impossible， 北京现代。
今日的王者，不止领域世界，他们超越这个世界。皇家礼炮让不凡成为非凡。
本节目由中国工商银行上海分行特约播出。
国家开发银行董事长陈元曾经这样评价保罗沃尔克，他是中国人民的朋友。事实上，这位中国人民的朋友不仅和陈元过从甚密，他和中国人民银行前行长戴相龙、国际货币基金组织副总裁朱民实际上也关系相当好。在他的上海之行中，保罗沃尔克对中国的改革和金融开放给予了热情的褒扬和温暖的鼓励。不过，他也语重心长地指出，中国如果想真的融入国际社会，就必须先接受国际的这些规则。这确实也值得我们时刻铭记在心。